They had stopped a woman at the border. She had dropped her boyfriend off to sneak through Peace Arch Park because she knew he wouldn't be able to cross. And she was from Florida. She had about $5,000 worth of perfume bottles in her car. And when the Canadian Customs ran her stuff, she had an outstanding felony warrant in Florida for organized theft. Right? So they pull her in, put her in a room, transfer her over to U.S. Customs. They check with Whatcom County Jail. Whatcom County Jail says, nope. So can you imagine? You're this woman. You're thinking, this is the worst day of my life. Mm-hmm. This is really going to suck. And then all of a sudden, after you sit in a holding cell, they go, well, you're free to go. Mm-hmm. And, you're going to be, huh? Why? Well, they don't have room in the jail. Guess what I'm going to do? If I'm that woman, I'm getting on the phone to all my buddies that I used to do organized retail theft with and go, we found a home. Get a ticket. This place is awesome. There's no room in the jail.
Just tell me about what you're doing here and why you're doing it.
Well,
and maybe share a little bit about who you are and
sure,
just a little bit of your own story.
I grew up here. I've lived in Whatcom County pretty much all my life except for 2 years, and that was on the east side. And I had my license in Arizona for a while. Did that kind of stuff. But there are roads here named after my family, right? So. We've been here for like 6 generations and stuff. And, over the last, I was a businessman, had a civil construction company for 30 years. The last 10 years, I've been in real estate, been pretty involved in the community. But I've watched public safety decline, right? I've watched these things happen. I've watched the county for the last quarter of a century try to build a new jail, right? The thing that Whatcom County and Bellingham love to do is they love to study, they love to talk, and then do nothing, and hire consultants, right? They love to do those things, and then nothing happens, nothing comes of it. It's been pretty much a year. I have a 4-year-old daughter, which, if you look at me, you go, huh? But that's okay, man. The best surprises in life are surprises, and she's amazing. But so I use that, I think, as my motivator that keeps me going on this stuff. Mm-hmm. But, it's like, what kind of community do we have? For 20 years, I didn't lock my cars. I left my keys in the ignition. I didn't lock my doors. I didn't do anything, right? And you look at this community that you've been in and you see things getting less safe. You see more crime. You see more graffiti. You see more drugs. You see our government leadership not doing anything. You see them literally like studying and kicking the can, bring it to a vote, make 27 excuses. Some of the people in leadership who talk about our local jail say, well, we've got this obsolete jail and it's got 20 years of deferred maintenance. And I usually look at those people and I say, no, we've got 20 years of deferred leadership. Mm. Because that's what leadership does, right? Leaders go, we need this. The community needs this to be okay. So we got to do something, right? And so I just looked at it and said, all right, somebody's got to do something. I looked at, because I have a construction background, I looked at what was already being worked on, and I'm like, they're building the railroad from this end. I'm going to go to the solution end and go to the other end. I'm going to talk to jail contractors and the people who develop and build jails for a living. We're going to start there. We have to have an interim because it's going to be 5 years. Can you imagine? We're supposed to have a vote on a levy for funds for a new jail. And if it's passed, and I'm hearing there's a group that's trying to push it off another year before it even goes on the ballot, it'll be 5 years before we have a single cell. Right now, we have severe booking restrictions. Our roster usually runs about 320, 330, somewhere in there. That's it. That's our maximum capacity.
And how many people, or what is the population of Bellingham and then the surrounding areas in Whatcom?
Bellingham's about 90, a little over 90,000. So let's just round that to 100. And then the rest of the county is about 130. So we're about 230,000, somewhere in there, a little under 250,000
So,
people.
yeah, so that's a pretty significant gap when it comes to, especially what's going on with our nation. So let me ask you this. So people that are being arrested or even interviewed by the police, is it just people that live in Whatcom County?
No. It's kind of interesting when you look at the stuff. We've got a lot of transitory people and a lot of things that happen because of our proximity to the Canadian border. A lot of times that really creates a whirlpool. People who are either coming in who've got warrants or people who are trying to leave who have warrants. And I was talking to a customs guy and asking him some questions, and he said basically on a daily basis they get people trying to cross one direction or the other with felony warrants. And right now Whatcom County is turning them away.
Did he give you an idea of how many people per day?
It's at least daily. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so if we said 306, no, let's just say one a day, that's 365.
360 people. Yeah.
And one of the examples he gave that was current at the time was that they had stopped a woman at the border. She had dropped her boyfriend off to sneak through Peace Arch Park because she knew he wouldn't be able to cross. And she was from Florida. She had about $5,000 worth of perfume bottles in her car. And when the Canadian Customs ran her stuff, she had an outstanding felony warrant in Florida for organized theft. Right? So they pull her in, put her in a room, transfer her over to U.S. Customs. They check with Whatcom County Jail. Whatcom County Jail says, nope. So can you imagine? You're this woman. You're thinking, this is the worst day of my life. This is really going to suck. And then all of a sudden, after you sit in a holding cell, they go, well, you're free to go. And, you're going to be, huh? Why? Well, they don't have room in the jail. Guess what I'm going to do? If I'm that woman, I'm getting on the phone to all my buddies that I used to do organized retail theft with and go, we found a home. Get a ticket. This place is awesome. There's no room in the jail.
I have a question for you that made me think. What does retail theft look like in Bellingham? Do you know?
What's it look like? It looks like somebody with a cartload of stuff overflowing, wheeling it out the door.
But is it a pretty common occurrence?
It's a very common occurrence. It's gotten a little bit better maybe in the last month or two. I think some of the retailers, it's been severe over the past 3 years. It's been really open and notorious. I mean, nobody's tried to be sneaky. Nobody's tried to hide anything. It's just load it up and run out the door. I just actually finished a meeting with the prosecuting attorney before this interview, and he was actually saying that they're booking more Berg 2 felonies than they have probably ever right now. The retailers are hiring armed guards and security companies and things, and they're finally cracking down to a significant level. So hopefully that'll taper off a little bit, but it's significant. I mean, we've got people running around Bellingham with 30, 35 misdemeanor theft charges. Because we have no capacity, right? So our politicians talk about changing the pursuit legislation. They talk about the Blake decision that keeps them from arresting people for drug possession and all those kinds of things. And people politicians point to those and say, well, that's the problem. It's the majority party that passed that bad legislation. And that may be true in some places, but in Whatcom County, if our police forces were at 100% staffing and those just bad decisions and bad legislation was all rolled back, we'd be in the same position.
Right.
We have literally
because you
nowhere
don't have
to
capacity.
Put them. We
right.
have zero capacity.
Well, and I think that answers the question I was going to ask you, why the focus on the jail? And so, I mean, you just said that. So you've watched your community decline. Your family has been here for more than 6 decades. or six generations.
Six
excuse me.
generations.
Six
So,
generations.
since
So
the 1800s.
yeah, so and you've watched it decline, and you have a child that you're bringing up in this community, so you're incentivized to try to bring some kind of order
Yeah.
as a member of the community, a long-standing member.
As a member, yeah, just as a community member. I've never been the guy who can stand by and watch a leadership vacuum. If stuff's not getting done and the people that we've elected and paid to do a job aren't doing the job, then if as citizens, if we don't get involved and do something, where's it going to be, right?
Yeah.
The question I ask the prosecutors, like, where are we going to be in 5 years if we don't do something? So all of that led me to reach out to some national companies that specialize in this. It was kind of a long, circuitous path to where we ended up, but through a course of quite a few different phone calls and connections and emails, I got connected with a company called ModCore, which they're a division of one of the largest detention companies in the United States. They build all the systems and all the components and all the stuff. They're rolling out a rapid deployment system. So what they claim is that in 8 to 12 to maybe 18 months, depending on the quantity, they can actually have a jail for us on the ground, right? Versus 5 years of, conventional construction. And so, the hope is that, we can get rid of our booking restrictions, right? So that we can actually hold people accountable and that they can have consequences so that they can understand that this isn't okay. This isn't what we want for this community, and hopefully we can get there. There are people who believe that incarceration is wrong. They're ideologically opposed to holding people accountable.
Yeah, I've experienced a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I understand that those are their beliefs. I think that until they encounter something, until they have one of those experiences that touches
evidence.
Yeah, something, like getting punched in the nose, right? There's nothing like getting mugged to make you understand that.
Everybody has a great idea. However, Mike Tyson says that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Right.
So.
And literally that happened with a local business leader.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. He's actively involved in many of the same things that I am currently. And that's what changed him. He was a downtown business owner. He literally got punched in the face.
Yeah.
Right. And he's like, wait, we have a problem.
So the acceptance perspective for him at that point changed.
Yes, it did.
Right. Do you think that's a common thing based on what you've experienced here in this small community that has a very, very large problem that it seems to be exacerbated in the last 3 years? Do you think that's a pretty common perspective with folks that they push these ideas or narratives that suggest that things are abusive or assaultive or that they should be abolished because we're victimizing folks that are literally perpetrating against people in our communities? Do you think that's pretty common?
It's more common than I like to think, and one of the things I always try to do is understand other people's perspective, right? Where are you coming from? Why do you think this? How is this kind or compassionate, to the people who are perpetrating the crimes or the community? One of the conversations I had with the prosecutor today, I said, part of the problem is that we've named our system wrong. We call it the criminal justice system. We need to call it the victim justice system. Because that's really who gets lost in all of this, at least in Washington. I feel like the people who are, and they say property crime is a victimless crime. And I'm sorry.
They say addiction is a victimless crime, Lyle, and I have experienced that that's not the case. But we're not talking about me today. So I'm going to say I appreciate the identification.
Yeah, it's like, no, every crime has a victim and every crime has a perpetrator. And the impacts of that on the community, a lot of the homeless advocates like to say, well, you're just picking on homeless people. And I'm like, wow, no, I didn't know homeless people were thieves. You just said that, and the truth is what I see in the unsheltered community in Bellingham is I see that there are people who are legitimately down on their luck, or, it's a lifestyle that they've chosen or whatever, and they're really not a problem. They're just people who are camping out doing their thing. And I think that if we were enforcing the laws and we were pulling those predatory members of society off the streets so that they couldn't prey on the people
Holding
in
them
those
accountable.
camps. Right. So they couldn't extort their neighbors in the whatever encampment they're in, so that they couldn't steal from them, so that they couldn't beat them up, and perpetrate violence on them. Doesn't this serve them more than any of us, really? And at the same time, it shifts the public perception of, as an example, there's a camp behind Walmart that the Bellingham Police Department will not take politicians through to see. They will not go there with less than platoon strength and canines because it's dangerous.
I saw some footage of it.
Yeah, can you imagine what other neighborhood in any city in America would be allowed to exist under those conditions on a regular basis? Something that they will only enter, literally with platoon strength dogs and under exigent circumstances.
Unfortunately, it's becoming more common than you'd like to think.
Okay. To me, it's surrender.
It is happening, actually, and surprisingly enough, it's happening across the nation. When I started to learn about these kind of encampments that were dangerous and growing, and there's no accountability. I've been witnessing it in Seattle for a very long time. Only
That's true.
The problem has grown exponentially since 2020. And in my experience, at least I know with King County, that there was the city attorney at that time, which I won't identify his name, but everybody can look that up, city attorney from 2020, made public announcement that certain crimes would not be prosecuted on media.
That sounds like a great strategy.
Yeah, and it's one of those kind of strategies that has been consistently used, I want to say, over the last number of years, where we have invited these problems into our communities. And then, despite the fact that we see, such as cities like San Francisco, that these kind of acceptance harm reduction policies have not been effective in improving the lives of the individuals that they are affecting, we're continuing to utilize that model across the nation, even in states like Colorado and Montana.
That's crazy to me.
It's pretty insane. And
it really is. One of the things that really bugs me too is one of the things that we're doing is awareness, right? Mm-hmm. Awareness campaigns, because believe it or not, there are people in Bellingham who will tell you that Bellingham's safe. It's not unsafe. It hasn't changed. It's and it's besides that, it's like this everywhere, and we're not as bad as Seattle. And I look at people and I go, wait, so is that how you set expectations and goals for your kids, right? Well, not as good as you were 5 years ago, but not as bad as that place yet. Right? Or that kid. Is that right? How we set goals for our lives and for, why do we do that for our communities?
Yeah.
It's just amazing to me. This whole thing has been a really interesting process. I feel like government officials really hear but don't hear.
Yeah. I honestly, and again, I try to be pretty reserved in how I discuss elected positions and the people in them. However, we have to keep in mind that their biggest focus is re-election. And so, the loudest voice in the room, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter if it's only one wheel out of 7 million. Mm-hmm. That's the wheel that's going to be paid the most attention to. And we kind of have a movement with that. And I believe that as a society, we're failing to recognize that when we're standing in certain areas of our metropolitan cities, which are the most common, but it's moving into smaller communities where we're seeing this population grow and the crime rates grow and the destruction of our cities grow and the victimization and the property crimes and all of those things are increasing. As we're seeing these things happen, and we recognize as individuals, because I have a lot of private conversations with people where they do tell me, I don't feel safe, but they're not comfortable saying these things out loud. And so, we have to take a look at who is leading the charge with this, right? And what we don't have is we don't have people that have been in the throes of those experiences who have actually overcome and said, hey, who are living differently. Because I know a slew, hundreds, if not thousands of people who have overcome many of the challenges that we see being exacerbated in our communities that are affecting families and lives. And people are, they're like, no, this is a terrible idea. And so, I think that we can all pretty clearly say after watching the last 3 years of the downward spiral happen that problems aren't being solved. They are not being solved. And it's time for us to do something different.
I would agree.
Yeah.
As an example, because the gauges for Whatcom County are pretty hard to follow and pretty hard to use, I've just kind of been tracking the city of Bellingham. They have a pretty nice database that they update daily. It goes into a spreadsheet pretty nicely, and so you can evaluate statistics. And pretty much across the board, we've been seeing increases in crime since 2019. I use 2019 kind of as the baseline year just because it was the last year pre-COVID, and things have really, really escalated since then. It's phenomenal. I mean, it's crazy. As an example, just one off the top of my head that comes to mind is in 2019 in Bellingham, there were 155 stolen cars.
That's a lot.
But I mean, Pierce County, it's
it's
that many
but the
a
population
day.
is very different, though.
Right.
It's different. Well, I guess it's not much smaller here than Tacoma itself,
Right.
but it's definitely
That was 2019. Fast forward to 2022, 501
Oh yeah.
in 1 year. So 1.5 a day.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's easy for us to hear statistics and we just kind of go, oh, okay, that's a number, right? And so I called some of the car lots in town to see what their inventories were. Basically, 3 of the biggest car lots in Bellingham, if you just took every car off their lot, that would be how many cars were stolen in 2022 in Bellingham. And you talk about victimless crimes, you talk about a family and you take away their source of transportation, right? It doesn't affect just the registered owner. What about their family? What about their kids? How do they get to
whatever documents they may have
How
had
do they
in their
get to
car?
work? All of the things with that. And they go, well, that loss is covered by insurance. And it's like
The sentimental things and the feeling unsafe, those things aren't covered by insurance.
no, they aren't.
The important documents that may have information on them that a person shouldn't have because it was in their personal vehicle, those things can't be covered by insurance.
No. And insurance doesn't pay you, you've got a deductible. And then, you're going to get an amount of money, but are you going to get a car that's actually in the same condition? How long is it going to take you to go through that process? I mean, even
the multiple hours of time that it took because of
the days, the weeks, and
we're looking at that individual as though they didn't harm anybody but themselves.
Right. Or smash and grab crimes, right? Break the side window out of a car in a parking lot or at a trailhead.
Right.
You climb and hike and do all that cool stuff.
I've had my window smashed. However, not at a trailhead yet. But I've definitely had my window smashed out and all of my items taken. Yeah.
Mine was downtown Vancouver, BC. But
it's not surprising.
I've been proud here before too, but haven't had a smash here. But yeah, I mean, so that's the kind of thing that happens. People don't realize how expensive side glass is.
Yeah.
It's more expensive than windshields.
Especially if you don't have full coverage.
Right. Yeah.
If you don't have full coverage with glass coverage.
Well, and the other thing that I see a lot that drives me nuts is you'll see a social media post, right? Hey, I was at Larrabee or I was at, Chuckanut, whatever. Somebody smashed my window, took my stuff, or I was at Padden, wherever. And then the victim shaming that happens, it's like 800 people get on and comment, well, you shouldn't leave stuff in your car. Right. You should leave your car unlocked. You should. And I'm just like, how have we gotten to this? I mean, I was raised, this is so foreign to me. I was raised like, if there's something sitting on a park bench and it doesn't belong to you,
don't touch it.
Yeah, or somebody's car window's rolled down and there's something sitting there.
Leave it alone.
Stay away from their car. It's not yours. How did we get to the point that
where we're shaming the victim,
right,
for the behavior of a perpetrator?
Exactly.
No, I know, and along the lines of victimless crimes like addiction. And I would imagine that a large portion of the population that is homeless here in Bellingham has addiction issues.
I would say.
And how many of those people are parents, I bet we don't know, because
Quite a few.
right. So we're leaving victims everywhere, family
Yeah,
members of those people, because everybody is a daughter, son, mother,
totally.
dad, cousin, uncle, friend.
It's
And
true.
that's not even including what it takes to actually get the drugs, which is a lot of what you're talking about. A lot of these property crimes are
Or feeding a
directly
habit.
associated with addiction.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's funny you mentioned that we had a situation near my work that's near here actually, and somebody had parked a cartload of goods from Target behind the insurance office next door, and so we usually get a call when that happens. And so a couple of us went out to deal with that and call security and recover the goods. And the guy actually had parked it and went out in the woods. He actually came back for his stuff. And so he grabs an armload of items out of the cart. And I kind of did the squawky crow thing and walked along with him. Said, dude, it's not yours. Put it back. Whatever. And he wasn't able to go fast enough. So he sequentially dropped items until he pretty much had like a hoodie or something. And then I'm talking to him and he's accusing me of stalling him. Oh, you're trying to stall me until the police come. I go, look, man, you and I both know the cops are never going to come here. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen. The cops aren't coming. I'm not stalling you. I'm talking to you because I'm kind of curious. I said, what's your story, man? You don't look like you've been out here a long time. Mm-hmm. So what's going on? Oh, well, my girlfriend cheated on me. We got 3 kids together. And I'd been clean for 3 years. I made some dumb decisions. Now I'm back on fentanyl, And so this guy's telling me a story, and it's like, dude, you're better than this. He's a commercial fisherman. He had the ability to make good income and have a great life and provide for his family. And here he is, he's doing $60 to $100 a day in blues. Mm-hmm. I'm like, how much does it cost you? He's like, well, it's $10 each, And so he's telling me his whole story. But I'm going to rehab on Friday. She's got me checked in. I talked to her and I said, oh, that's really good. Yeah, he says, I'm weaning myself off. I said, oh, that's good. Then he hit me up for $60.
Right.
He's like, hey man, can I have some money to get me through the rest of the day? And I just looked at him and said, did you not hear anything we talked about? I said, how about this? If you want a place to sleep, I said, go check yourself in at the Mission. You can get a jump start on your rehab. Oh no, man! I got really mad and left. Yeah. And that's where it's at. And it's really sad. I mean, it's not hard to spot. No. It's like at 4:00 when it starts to get dark, or 5:00 when it starts to get dark. All the zombies come out. Right.
Well, it's easier to hide what you're doing when it's dark.
I suppose, yeah, but it's not though. They kind of glow in the dark light green.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's literally, and it's sad, to make light of, but it really, downtown Bellingham, my partner has a flower shop next to Bellingham High School, and it's literally like The Walking Dead. Mm-hmm. At 5:00 when it starts to get dark, they start howling and screaming and start coming out of the bushes and out of the creek bottom, and it's really sad.
It's terribly sad.
I mean, it really is. I remember back a few years ago, we were in Old Town on Holly Street having some lunch, and one of the older kids put a French fry out on the railing of the place where we were eating, and I said, "What's that for? Is that for the birds?" "Nope, that's bum bait." I said, "Really? Huh, okay." And I kid you not, it was so perfect. I guess we have to be careful what we put out in the universe. Because pretty soon there was a gentleman who was walking up the other side of the street, having a really bad day, super emotional, kind of crying and yelling loudly and very intoxicated. The guy came across the street and made a beeline for that spot on the rail. He was not after the French fry, but kind of one of those divine appointment kind of things. And so I went over and talked to him for a minute. He'd had a death in his family in Canada. He was having a bad day. I said, "Have you eaten?" "No." I said, "Come on." And I don't share this to say, hey, I'm great. But, and that kid got really angry. He's like, "You're endangering us. You're putting us at risk." And I said, "No." I said, "I already sized him up. He's cool." But I said, listen, the reason I'm doing this is because I hope if you're ever in that position, somebody buys you lunch. And so, none of this is without compassion. And sometimes the best thing you can do for someone isn't to buy them lunch. It's not to give them money. It's to say, hey, we got a problem. Let's do something with this. I've had people on my couch before. I've gotten guys into rehab. The drill. That lasts 3 days. And then they're like, we're out of here. Yeah. And so you do that kind of stuff enough, and you just learn that it doesn't matter how much I want them to be better, or you want them to be better, or society wants them to be better, or what we do for them, until they want it more than we want it for them. Yeah. More than their mom or dad or grandma or anybody, they're not going to be better. And we can throw every resource that we can muster at them. But it's not going to take until they want change, until they're sick enough of it, until they're like, this doesn't work for me anymore. I really do want to be better. Then we see change, and it doesn't mean that they're perfect, and it doesn't mean that it's not a struggle, but it's so hard. I think sometimes out of compassion that we so badly want people to be better, and we think that putting them in jail is mean, or, having them have accountability is mean, because they can't help it. They have substance use disorder, which, honestly, between you and me, I hate that term.
So do I.
Calling addiction a disorder when it really started with, I don't think there's anyone who takes their first hit.
With a choice.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone who takes their first drug unless it was forced on them. They were tied down and it was administered to them. I don't think there's really anybody in North America who doesn't know that if I take that, there's a good chance I'm going to get addicted.
Yeah, well, and arguably, depending on how old the person is, but
yeah,
I appreciate. I just appreciate you sharing that. Thank you for your vulnerability. Because it's not just about incarceration with you.
It's not.
It's because you actually have hope. And so let me ask you a question. How can jail help the person actually get better?
So, I obviously don't have lived experience. But, it's funny how you get experience with things in life. And wisdom sometimes is learning from the mistakes of other people.
That is true.
And my dad was a very wise man. I grew up in one of those Leave It to Beaver households for the most part. But
I imagined, fantasized about that household for a lot of years.
But, I think our family vice is probably work, right?
Mm-hmm.
People always have things that are out of balance. And I think our family addiction is work. I am a workaholic, but, that's a socially acceptable one. But my dad always attracted strays. Mm-hmm. And, I can remember as a little kid, probably 7 or 8, 9 years old, his coworkers' kids would show up just bombed out of their mind, on something. And, I can remember bags of dope and pipes and stuff sitting on our kitchen counter, for weeks that he had taken off of one of these strays that he was trying to help. And I think the value from that, one of the things, I witnessed people with drug-induced schizophrenia, at a pretty early age. I saw a lot of those negative things. And I think that was a deterrent in my life, personally, right? But then you have the exposure to the impacts of that, right? I had classmates who had drug-induced schizophrenia. I had a nephew by marriage who had that, who, and ultimately led him to be homeless, led him to be injured in incarceration, become a quadriplegic, and die from that. His family got a settlement. That's just, it's a tragedy. It's those kinds of things that happen. and then, I've had employees and friends and people who've been in addiction. And so, you get exposed to those kinds of things, like running a construction company with dump trucks, right? You've got DOT requirements. So you're constantly drug testing and whatever. And you would think, a relatively small company in a relatively small area, you wouldn't run into a lot of that kind of stuff. I had people test out for everything you can imagine, and I'm just like, you're kidding me. In fact, one of my former drivers was arrested in a pretty big local drug bust this last year. And he was the one who tested out for cocaine at the time. And he didn't really have symptoms, right? He wasn't thin, he wasn't, whatever, and total denial. I mean, that was kind of a funny story. We're sitting in the office visiting. He says, "Man, it's a false positive." I go, "Dude, I'm on your side. If this is a false positive, this is a career ender for you as a commercial driver. Let's fight it." So we're talking, and I'd called up the drug lab and stuff, and send him in for a retest and whatnot. And in the middle of the conversation, just in a totally random spot, he's like, "I thought that only stayed in your system 24 hours. I'm like, "We're done." But
Yeah.
I mean, so, it's everywhere, right? This stuff is everywhere. And I think that jail, the thing of it is that if we don't hold people accountable, right? If we don't do that, it just doesn't work. And back to your question of jail, it's like jail provide, from what I've seen, and I'm not an expert. I think, my stuff is just experience based. But what I've witnessed over and over again, and talked to so many people who've come out of treatment and treatment doesn't work. I've been there 4 times, and whatever, and those, it almost always comes down to the association function, right? It's like, who do you hang out with before, who do you hang out with after? But when people get a break in their life, when you get to that point where you're committing crimes in your addiction and stuff, I think it's really important that, jail creates that break, right? It breaks your habits, it breaks your patterns, it changes your association for a while. If they don't load you up on Subutex or Suboxone or something like that while you're incarcerated, and maybe hopefully help you, through some withdrawal and things, you can actually have some clarity in your life, and I think that's so important. I think that's where we're missing now. I was talking with someone last week, and their kid had been in jail and said, "I haven't been that high for a whole week in forever."
Yeah.
Because they're getting Subutex in the jail. I brought that up with the prosecutor today, and apparently they're obligated to continue their addiction, because I talked to him about.
Yeah, it's another thing that's been advertised.
Yeah.
Nationwide.
Yeah. I was talking to him about that. I'm like, why, as part of their sentencing, why wouldn't we sentence them to sobering? It's like, hey, look, we're going to help you through we'll give you medically supervised withdrawal, whatever. Mm-hmm. But, if you're going to commit these crimes, if you're going to be our guest, you're going to get clean. Now, he was informing me that the ACLU's had cases against that, and that may not be possible, which really seems ludicrous to me. I think that's a policy or a law that should be challenged. Mm-hmm. And I think the best way to challenge it is to implement the policy.
Yeah, I feel like if anything's a policy or a law, it has the ability to be changed.
Well, and he said it's not. The interesting thing about that is it's not statutory, so it's not in law; it's in case law. Mm-hmm. So it's so then it's
that makes it
all wrapped
likely
up
to be overturned if in fact it goes into the courts just because there was another case, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So. But like my question to him was, well, so what? Why don't we challenge this? This isn't in anybody's interest. It's certainly not in the interest of the person who's coming in. It's not in the interest of their families. Their families mostly want them to be better.
Yeah.
And the hope
and it's not in the interest, and you can get this from any person that does have the lived experience with that process, who has overcome and now lives freely of those adulterants and behaviors. They're not really asking anybody that is living in that space,
right,
what their perspective is on it. So I find that always so interesting.
Yeah. And, and I think that's, the county's just gone through, I talked earlier about that they like to study everything forever. And they've finally gone through another gyration and generated another report. I think one of the brightest spots in that, though, is they're really putting an emphasis on lived experience. And so that really gives me hope that, that people like yourself and Derek and people who've been there, done that, who've actually lived it and come out the other side successfully, by any measure. I mean, seriously, it's inspiring and amazing to me to, I had a great lunch with Derek the other day, and the conversations that you and I have had, it gives me hope that, what, there is a path and there is a way for people to have a better life.
Yeah.
Should they choose that.
We can incentivize that, though, as a system.
We can.
We can incentivize it. We can be more intentional. We're having some very strange experiences with intention now, and I believe that our experiences as a system with intention prior to the last number of years has also been interesting. It was just separation with no intentional implementation of services, and then we have to be very careful in how we utilize and participate with services, because not all services are intentional either, not in regards to individual freedom.
Tell me more about that. I mean, you just mentioned individual freedom. So, like, does that like rehab, like I mentioned, in the conversation, with requiring people to go through withdrawal if they're arrested. Yeah. So we kind of can't do that. Is that kind of the way that works?
Yeah, well, in regards to individual freedom, so when I always speaking about a person served, so right. In regards to the words individual, but freedom is really, let's just consider prison. Prison isn't always a physical structure. Sometimes it is something that exists within our 2 ears, right?
Right.
And we can look at addiction in that way. And when a person is bound in submission to a thing, specifically a chemical in this regard, right? Freedom from that is the ability to not have to participate and be bound in submission to that thing. Right? Okay. And so what we're doing as a society with this idea of harm reduction is we are essentially making the government the dope man. And so with Suboxone, methadone, Subutex, any of these replacement drugs, we're immediately putting people on them so that people don't have to experience pain. Well, that pain is a huge part of the process that incentivizes an individual to not have to go through that again, right? And so as a system, we do have the capability of incentivizing that, right? And it begins with arrest. And so... So, to take your idea about that separation even a step further, and this is one of the things that I'm trying to prove, with what I've created, is that we can be intentional as a system to try to move an individual from that moment of clarity that you were discussing when they're separated to this place where, you essentially, as a system, implement the necessary inputs, right? Whatever that looks like within a specific range of topics, consistent with an individual's life, the contributing factors, right? So we assess those factors and we find where the deficits are, and then we become intentional and we help that person develop skills and abilities to overcome their challenges and live in that individual freedom. So if that makes sense.
That does.
Yeah.
While you're talking about that, I just kind of was thinking about the earlier conversation that I had today with the prosecutor and talking about, how you couldn't force people to withdraw according to case precedent, right? You couldn't just put them into withdrawal treatment.
I think you should.
I think you should too. So the other thought I was having is like when they were talking, he was talking, well, we can't violate someone's rights by putting them into withdrawal treatment. But at what point, like, if somebody's impaired or intoxicated, as a realtor, I can't allow them to sign a contract for a purchase, right? So then if somebody's in that level of addiction and impairment, at what point can we make involuntary decisions or rulings on their behalf? Right? Because they aren't competent in that condition to sign a contract on their own behalf. So are they competent to say, I don't want treatment at that point? You know,
Right.
I mean, it's
Right.
probably apples and oranges on some level. I'm not
No.
an attorney, but, from a simple common sense standpoint, it's like, well, that makes total sense.
Why would we allow an impaired person to make decisions that they're
That are
incapable?
detrimental for their
Right.
to their
Well, and I think
well-being?
even a better question is, when did these sort of ordinances or policies, when were they enacted?
Mhm.
Because that hasn't been the case. So
Right.
mat requirement, or that hasn't been in policy for county jails for a long period of time. So this is all very new.
Right.
This has all just been happening over the last few years.
Yeah.
So I'd be really interested in seeing like when that happened and how it happened.
I requested case law.
Okay.
So
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
So
So you'll be showing that.
yes, I'll be sharing that when it comes in, because
Yeah.
I was extremely curious.
Yeah, because I'd like to see that. Because,
Right. I was surprised. I mean, honestly, as a citizen, I feel like I consider myself more involved and more informed than average, but maybe not.
no, I would have to say so,
but-
especially as a person that didn't have addiction issues yourself. So
Yeah. Well, like I said, learning from other people's mistakes, hopefully. And work has always been my addiction. So, of choice. That's my drug of choice. But, so yeah, it just seems, it was just shocking. It's surprising to me that, we can't actually act on someone's behalf, or, and I didn't go here with them, but, this probably ties into your next segment, why can families not put in a request that
Right.
their loved one who's in the system, why can they not request that on their behalf?
right.
Right?
Well, the interesting thing about families, I just recently learned this with my 16-year-old daughters. We don't have any consent after the age of 12 with what happens to our own kids. So not a surprise that they completely disable our ability to have any input in our families' lives as they get older.
I didn't realize that. That's wild.
I realized that as this doctor was prescribing my 16-year-old Prozac, and then was pitting my kid against me when I wasn't in the room with her, and let my kid know that she didn't have to talk to me about any of this, that I didn't have to consent to anything. My child, who had experience with trying to commit suicide and abuse medication to do so, it would seem like common sense to actually have a conversation with the parent, when
Right.
prescribing. And so we've had a lot of really kooky things change in our nation over the last number of years. But
Yeah.
I learned about the consent thing through mental health, because the schools teach our children what they can and can't do, what parents' legal limitations are until the age of 12. And and so I had a really intense experience with this just a couple weeks ago. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I think we could do a whole segment
yeah.
on that. We
Yeah,
should
don't
in
even
the
get me
ne-
started. Yeah, I feel
we
like
should in
that's
the
next
future, I think.
policy mission I have.
Right.
So, yeah, because I'm not going to be held legally and financially responsible if, in fact, I have absolutely no consent in what happens in the life of my kid. So,
Why would you?
yeah, because they know, and then I promise you, some of them will use it to the best of their ability to try to make sure that your life is hell sometimes, because
Right.
that's what teenagers do.
Yes, no, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think they start doing that as toddlers.
Yeah, me too. It gets, at least for me, I
Once
think
they
moms
learn
and
that they can
daughters have a
turn
lot.
once they learn that they can pit one parent against the other,
Oh, for sure.
if it's as soon as it's not a united front anymore,
Yeah,
even toddlers are really great at that.
I know, they're so good at it.
Right?
I know. It's like, who taught you that?
Well, but you know what? It's
Human nature.
Yes. Well, and it's just like the SUDS thing, right? How it rewires your brain.
Yeah.
And you've got to have that same kind of boundaries, consistency, and consequences
Yeah.
that a toddler has to have.
Well, and I love that we're actually morphing into this conversation, because that is exactly how we need to address the problem that we're experiencing. And I just put it into one overarching problem. It's a system problem that we're experiencing with our citizens. In
Wait,
this
it's
nation.
systemic?
I'm just saying. And so, we're not treating people the same way we would our own child. And that's extremely problematic, because no matter, and we would resolve a whole lot of the issues that we're experiencing if in fact we did. You know, if my kid went out tomorrow and decided she was going to smoke crack, I would not invite 5 of her closest crackhead friends and her into my house and allow them to steal from my purse and victimize me. I just wouldn't do it. I would do everything in my power to put her in a situation where she could be surrounded by people moving in a similar direction that are trying to live a different kind of life. You know, or we can take another example. If there was a guy sitting on the street stabbing himself with a knife, we would immediately intervene in that process. We would give them the necessary services for them to stop stabbing themselves, to remove them from society until they were secure, and then try to do everything in our power to help get them on track so they could live independently without stabbing themselves. So, you know, I don't think that we're approaching any of these issues with common sense approach.
No, I would agree with you. It's really interesting. I keep going back to that Stakeholder Advisory Council report because it's something that I've been working on a lot lately. That's kind of what I do instead of sleep. But because when you don't have enough hours in the day,
I know.
you can always sleep
Trust
less.
me, I know.
I am sure you do know. And one of the things that's in there, you know, is lived experience. And then they talk about all of these services that they want. And when I talk to people who are against incarceration, but who acknowledge we need a new jail, you know, they're talking about numbers like 500 or 600 beds, right? You know, and if you take the last needs assessment we had, it said we need 649 to get us through 2026, which is almost right on the mark. Because when I talked to the lieutenant at the jail, he's like, we've got like 328. He says, you know, if we didn't have restrictions, we'd have 150 more, which essentially puts us right around 500. You know, you got that 25% buffer rule, so that puts us right at like 649. You know, I mean, we're literally right there. That assessment was so accurate, but yet they're talking about something that's going to be built 5 years from now with a capacity of like 600. You know, so we're slated to have booking restrictions on year one. If we take that 2013 assessment that says we need 649, and you take the same way of calculating the number of beds we need, extend it for 30 more years to 2056, it comes out to like 1,162 beds. So 1,200 beds in round numbers, right? And when I look at the SAC report and they want a sobering center and they want mental health treatment, maybe in-house competency restoration and evaluation, and they want all these services and things, I look at that and I go, well, why don't we build 1,200 beds now? Get the economy of scale. We make sure that we have capacity for the next 30 years without entering into another capital process and more voting and more levies and more nonsense. And in the interim time, we've got like 500 beds or 600 beds potentially that we can use for services and treatment, you know, and then we get the economy of scale again, not just in the building process, but also in wraparound services, right? Because you've got, you know, if you've got treatment in-house, if you've got behavioral and mental health and substance and all that under one roof, that's over here in this other part that's not in the jail with a separate outside entrance, so they're not coming through the jail. If you've got that all under house, when you have prison or, you know, when you have inmate population who need those services, it's everything. It's already right there. It creates the opportunity. The other thing they really identified is that there's a transitional need. A lot of times it takes like 3 days to get their Medicare and Medicaid back reinstated because they lose it when they're incarcerated. It's like, well, that's great. Look, we've got transition beds over here. Right. We've got a transition ward.
Get all of their services
right.
set up.
Get the social worker working with them.
And you have something structured on the outside of that so people can transition into independence.
Yeah, it creates a buffer, not just, well, you know, your case is, you know, the judge ruled you got time served, you're out, see ya, you know.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week, you know, seems to be the case. But anyway, and so, you know, that's really something I think if I could communicate that to people, is like, look, you know, we can have our cake and eat it too. Mm-hmm. You know, we can have capacity so that we don't have booking restrictions again. We're not looking for mass incarceration. As a matter of fact, we want 1,200 beds so for now, we can use this to help people. And then if the need for incarceration grows, great, we've got a block of 50 over here that is going to now move from service to incarceration. Mm-hmm. You know, and man, you know what? If Grace and Lead are effective and they can literally, make a difference, those diversions and all those other programs, those are great. I'm not against any of those programs at all. I'm all for them. I just doubt the efficacy of them.
Right.
Because
people aren't really gathering data on the outcomes. The outcomes aren't really what people are looking at. They're looking at the inputs.
Right. Well, because I hate to say it makes me feel better.
Right. Well, it makes everybody feel better.
As a society, right?
I don't know what to do. This problem is too big. Oh, they sound like they know what to do. Let's just sweep it over to the right. Now I've done something.
And we're not putting them in jail.
Now I've done something.
Right.
Right.
Because that's the mean thing.
Everybody says it's bad to put people in jail, so we don't want to do that.
Is it bad?
No. If it wasn't for jail, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And my life is pretty phenomenal. I'm not rich, but I can tell you that my life is beyond anything I thought possible. And if I were using today in the environment and the climate that, we're experiencing across the nation, I would probably be on my way to dead, if not already. But no, I mean, I have 17 felony convictions. I've been to prison 3 times. I had almost 30-year relationship with drugs, including opiates, meth, cocaine, all of the things. Not fentanyl. It wasn't out there.
Thank God.
Thank God. But no, I've been clean for 10 years, clean and sober. I was arrested in 2012, and I was facing a 4th prison sentence, and I got the opportunity to do a community-based program after being incarcerated for 6 months and doing a program inside of incarceration. I had to piecemeal process for myself together because I knew there were components that needed to be addressed that the system itself didn't have the capability of addressing in an intentional way. And so, thankfully, I'm extremely aware, and so I knew what I needed. As a result of all of that, in my experience and where I come from and where I grew up and the kind of environment I was in, I have created a very intentional program to begin in incarceration, to incentivize arrest, to advocate for policy change so that we can be very intentional as a system. So, and part of my goal, it's not just to help people learn how to save their own lives, because the bottom line is this nobody could save my life. I had to do it for myself. But what happened for me during incarceration is that clarity happened. I didn't have Matt. Thank God, I didn't have methadone or Suboxone. But when I did, I usually bought it on the streets, and I used it for a short period of time so I could wean myself off of the opiate and then gain clarity. And so, but then what happened for me is, during that moment of clarity, I got an opportunity to participate in something that actually fed my spirit. And as I started to learn more about me, I started to live with integrity. And then I started to pick up skills that helped me navigate life outside of addiction and incarceration. And the more I focused on those things, the better I felt about myself. The better I felt about myself, the less I wanted to escape who I was, the more I wanted to actually be the parent. Because I abandoned 3 children. I had 2 children grow up in the foster system. One of them transitioned into adult prison and just got out a couple of years ago after serving 10 years. My youngest is 16, almost 17, and she was with her dad, and then her dad ended up relapsing. And so, I was an epic failure in every sense of the word, every sense of the phrase, essentially. And so, incarceration was the jumping off point for me to access a life, because I was miserable in that life, but my addiction dominated my experience, which put me in this place where I had no agency. Everything was about using and finding ways and means to get more. And I didn't care who I hurt in that process. And, addiction's not a victimless crime. Whether I'm hurting myself, and it's never just me. It's also the people that I'm committing crimes against. It's my family members. It's the people that care about me. It's the people that believe in me. It's, everyone that I steal from, everybody whose property I destroy, the people that I assault in and out of addiction. And so, we can do better as a society. We can do better as a system. And the lived experience piece is something that I'm a firm believer in, because as I was sitting on a university campus, and I recognized all these really brilliant young people who sounded like they knew more about my life than I did. And then the next year, George Floyd happened and COVID happened, and I was like, oh, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And that's when I really started to recognize the value in my life experience. And that's when I really, decided to own my experience and to push forward to try to create a solution for people like me, and and that includes people that are in homelessness, people that are incarcerated, and people that are in the throes of addiction, and really, the process I've created can like transition into any community. I don't care if it's a person that overeats or what have you,
Right.
but it starts with an internal process where we have to become aware of who we are, what we do, and what we actually want to have happen. And that's when the intentional supports come in and they meet the individual where the deficits exist, right? And we can transform our carceral system to be the tools that they were intended to be in the first place. And what we end up with is public safety, right? Because when you have an individual that actually starts to live in integrity and they don't want to lose that, they start to not just value themselves, but they start to value everything around them, and they don't want to destroy those things.
Right.
And so we end up with a safer society. We end up with reunified families. We end up with independence. We end up with people not draining the system, because we have decided to be a country of handouts, where we're actually leaving our citizens to flail out on the street and destroy themselves. And we're
Right.
allowing a whole bunch of other people to come in and take the benefits that, we're not even willing to give to the people that are destroying their lives.
Yeah.
Anyway, end monologue.
No, that's amazing. I mean, thanks so much for having me here today,
Yeah.
and for your time, and
Thank you.
for your story and your insight. And, I look forward to a lot more of it.
Yeah.
I think
I look forward to the work that we're going to do together.
I think it's gonna be awesome.
Me too.
It's it's the right time, the right place, and it's just sad, looking at the community and seeing the state that it's in, and seeing people's willingness to accept the change.
Yeah.
Is just, it's heart rendering. It
Yeah.
really is. It just makes you want to just quit. But
Yeah. I think people are afraid in our society right now. I try to give as much grace as I can. But I think that we have successfully, as a country, the leadership and media in our country that is absolutely informed and affected by our leadership, have intimidated our citizenry to the point to where people are afraid to say what they think out loud. And I do believe that this problem seems so big and overarching that people really don't know what to do about it. So they just sweep it to the guy on the right.
yeah,
And so it's time. It's given me and people similar to myself and people like you that we come together as the village to say, nope, we have the answer to solve a lot of this stuff, and this is what we need to do.
yeah. Thank you so much for honestly, not just like, okay, I made myself better, because you know what, a lot of times for a lot of people that's their journey.
Right.
It's like, all right, I got myself stabilized, I've got things going the right way, but you've really externalized that and made a big commitment and a big decision to pass that on and to really impact other people, and that's phenomenal.
Yeah, I feel like I don't have a choice. So
I understand that.
You know what I mean?
I
Yeah,
do.
I know. I feel like because like this isn't even your job yet. You're working this as a job, and so, I think these roles are chosen for us
I
from
would
some
say that.
cosmic place, like whatever a person's belief is. I
Yeah.
can talk about mine, but I don't think it's necessary. But I think these roles are chosen for us, and I think we're prepared our entire life to make these things happen. And I think it's like, oh, okay, now it's time.
Yeah.
So now it's time.
It's time.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
You bet.